The stars looked different from the underbelly of a cargo ship. Zara had memorized the constellations of her home planet since childhood: the Hunter, the twin moons, the great river that her people believed carried souls to the afterlife. But these stars were cold and unfamiliar, like tiny eyes watching her suffering without intervention. 17 cycles old by her planet's calendar, Zara had spent the last 3 years as property of the Vraxian Trading Consortium. Her species, the Lyrans, were prized throughout the galaxy for their natural empathic abilities the Consortium had found particularly profitable. Her captors had fitted her with a neural inhibitor at the base of her skull, a cruel device that simultaneously suppressed her telepathic gifts while amplifying her sensitivity to the emotions of others. The perfect tool for an unwilling servant. Cargo inspection. Everyone up. The harsh voice of the Vraxian overseer echoed through the hold, followed by the distinctive sound of an electro-whip crackling against metal. Zara winced, her fingers instinctively reaching for the inhibitor embedded in her flesh. Around her, other captives, some Lyran like herself, others from worlds she couldn't name, stirred from their meager sleeping pallets. The ship had been traveling for weeks, stopping at various outposts to trade specialty goods, a euphemism for sentient beings sold into service. Today they were docking at Frontier Station Epsilon, a human-controlled trading post on the edge of Terran space. Humans were relatively new to interstellar travel, having achieved faster-than-light capabilities only 70 years ago. Most established species viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. They were unpredictable, emotional, and hadn't yet learned the pragmatic indifference that characterized older spacefaring civilizations. Lyran girl. The overseer, a hulking Vraxian with mottled gray skin, jabbed a 3-fingered hand toward Zara. Special client asked for one of your kind. Pretty one. Make yourself presentable. Zara's stomach tightened with dread. Special clients typically meant wealthy patrons with specific tastes. She'd been spared the worst fates so far, mostly serving as an empath for hire in trading negotiations, where her force sensitivity to emotions made her valuable for detecting lies and leverage points. But she'd heard the whispered horrors from others who returned from special assignments. If they returned at all, 2 guards escorted her to a preparation room, where she was given clean clothes, simple but far better than the threadbare uniform she normally wore, and told to wash. The water was actually warm, a luxury she hadn't experienced since her capture. That detail frightened her more than anything. Whoever this client was, they were paying enough to warrant exceptional treatment of the merchandise. Hours later, Zara found herself in a viewing room, a space designed to display premium acquisitions to discerning customers. Through the one-way transparent wall, she could see a human male speaking with Draz, the consortium's chief negotiator. The human looked unremarkable by his species standards, average height, with the short dark hair and light skin common among Terrans who spent most of their time in space. What caught her attention was his stance. Unlike the typical slouch of most humans, he stood with the disciplined posture of a military officer. Her empathic range is exceptional, Draz was saying, his translator converting his clicking Vraxian speech into standard Galactic common. Tested at level 9 sensitivity. The neural inhibitor ensures compliance while amplifying reception. Perfect for security operations, negotiations, or personal uses. The implication in his tone made Zara's skin crawl. The human's face remained expressionless. The inhibitor, it causes pain? Manageable discomfort, Draz replied with a dismissive gesture. Necessary for control. Without it, Lyrans can be difficult. The human nodded slowly, his eyes meeting Zara's through the transparent barrier. Though she knew he couldn't actually see her, a chill ran through her body. Something in his gaze seemed to pierce through the one-way material, as if he knew exactly where she stood. I'll take her, he said finally, his voice flat and emotionless. Transfer the agreed payment. I want delivery within the hour. As the human turned to leave, Zara caught a glimpse of something metallic at his wrist. Not jewelry, but some kind of device with a blinking light. Her heart sank. This wasn't just any human, this was someone with connections, technology, and purpose. Whatever fate awaited her with this new master, it would be calculated, deliberate. What Zara couldn't possibly know was that in less than 24 hours, everything she understood about humans, freedom, and her own potential would be completely transformed. The neural inhibitor that had been her prison for 3 years was about to become the key to a revolution that would shake the foundations of the galaxy, and the seemingly ordinary human who had purchased her was anything but what he appeared to be. The transfer of ownership happened with disturbing efficiency. Within the hour, Zara found herself aboard a small Terran shuttle, seated across from her new master in a sparse but clean cabin. No restraints bound her wrists, unnecessary with the neural inhibitor ensuring compliance. The human hadn't spoken since they'd left the station, instead focusing on a data tablet, occasionally glancing up at her with unreadable eyes. Zara studied him cautiously. Humans were known to be unpredictable, their emotions volatile compared to older species. This one seemed different, controlled, deliberate. The shuttle's artificial lighting revealed details she hadn't noticed in the viewing room. A thin scar that ran from his right temple to his jaw, hands calloused from work rather than the soft fingers of wealthy traders, and most notably, eyes that held something she rarely saw in the galaxy, genuine anger carefully contained. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Daniel Chen," he finally said, setting down his tablet. "Officially, I'm a commercial consultant with Terran Frontier Operations. Unofficially," he paused, studying her reaction. "That's a conversation for somewhere more secure." Zara remained silent, having learned years ago that speaking without permission often triggered the inhibitor's punishment protocols. The human, Chen, seemed to understand her hesitation. "You can speak freely," he said, his voice softer than before. "I won't activate the pain response." "Why should I believe you?" The words escaped before she could stop them, tinged with 3 years of accumulated bitterness. She tensed, preparing for the familiar surge of agony from the device in her neck. Nothing happened. Chen's expression shifted subtly. "Because I've disabled that particular function." He lifted his wrist, showing her the device she'd noticed earlier. "This isn't jewelry. It's a neural dampening field generator, military grade. It can't remove the inhibitor, but it can interfere with certain aspects of its programming." Zara's mind raced. The inhibitor was Vraxian technology, notoriously resistant to tampering. A crude attempt to disable it would trigger a feedback loop that could cause permanent brain damage or death. If this human possessed technology capable of selectively blocking its functions, "You're not a trader," she stated, certainty growing. "Or a collector." "No." His gaze shifted to the viewport where stars streaked by in FTL transit. "I represent a joint task force that officially doesn't exist. We've been tracking the consortium's operations for the past 18 months. Your purchase was part of a larger operation." Though the inhibitor still muffled her natural empathic abilities, Zara could sense the truth in his words. Still, experience had taught her caution. If you're fighting the slave trade, why buy a slave? Why not just raid the ship? Chen's jaw tightened. Politics. The consortium operates in a regulatory gray area. Many systems consider their contracts, indentured servitude rather than slavery, technically legal in parts of the galaxy. A direct military action could trigger diplomatic incidents we can't afford right now. "So I'm what? Evidence?" "You're a witness. And potentially much more." He leaned forward, intensity flashing in his eyes. "What do you know about the genetics program they're running on Lyran captives?" The question sent a chill through Zara's body. During her captivity, she'd heard whispers about certain Lyrans being taken to research facilities, never to return. Most assumed they'd been sold to distant buyers, but occasionally, Tex would mention the program in hushed tones. "Very little," she admitted. "They separated us by empathic strength. Those with ratings above level 8 were sometimes transferred to special assignments." She hesitated. "I was scheduled for transfer next month. They said my ratings had evolved." Chen nodded as if confirming something he already suspected. The consortium isn't just selling Lyrans for their natural abilities. They're experimenting with ways to enhance those abilities, to create weapons-grade empaths who can do more than read emotions, who can manipulate them even at a distance. The implication struck Zara with horrifying clarity. Mind control. Influence rather than control, but yes. Chen tapped something on his wrist device, bringing up a holographic display between them. This is what we found at a raided facility 6 months ago. The image showed a Lyran, male and older than Zara, suspended in some kind of containment field. His body was thin to the point of emaciation, and multiple neural interfaces protruded from his skull, far more invasive than her single inhibitor. His eyes were open but vacant, glowing with an unnatural blue light. Subject 127, Chen explained grimly. Former name unknown. He was able to induce panic in a room of 50 people simultaneously. From 3 decks away, through shielded bulkheads. That's impossible, Zara whispered, though deep down she knew it wasn't. Lyran histories spoke of ancient empaths who could sway crowds with their gifts. Before such practices were banned by their own people, Chen deactivated the hologram. The consortium believes you have similar potential. That's why I had to extract you before the transfer. Whatever they did to him. His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. They wouldn't have left anything of Zara behind except her abilities, amplified and weaponized. The next 3 days passed in a blur as Chen's shuttle made a series of seemingly random jumps through lesser-known transit points. Zara learned they were headed to a hidden Terran outpost in the Cygnus Reach, a region of space largely ignored by the major powers due to its sparse resources and difficult navigation conditions. The consortium has informants everywhere, Chen explained as they shared a simple meal in the shuttle's compact galley. We need to make sure we're not being tracked. Zara nodded, still adjusting to the strange new reality where she could speak freely, eat proper meals, and move about the shuttle without permission. The neural dampening field continued to block the inhibitor's control functions while leaving her limited empathic abilities intact. Even those small freedoms felt overwhelming after years of captivity. What happens when we reach your outpost? She asked, pushing the remains of her food around the plate. Chen's expression tightened slightly. Our medical team will examine you, particularly the inhibitor. If possible, we'll attempt removal. And if it's not possible? He met her eyes directly. The inhibitor is integrated with your central nervous system. Removal is complicated. I won't lie to you, Zara. There are risks. The possibility of permanent damage or death hung unspoken between them. Zara had heard stories of failed removal attempts that left Lyrans with permanent psychological damage, their natural empathic abilities twisted into constant, unfiltered emotional chaos. And if I choose not to risk removal, she pressed. That's your choice. We won't force you. Chen's voice carried an unexpected gentleness. But with or without the inhibitor, we could use your help. Your knowledge of consortium operations, shipping routes, personnel, it could save others like you. Before Zara could respond, the shuttle's proximity alarm blared. Chen was instantly on his feet, moving to the cockpit with practiced efficiency. She followed, watching as he scanned the displays with growing tension. Proximity alert, bearing 047, closing fast, the shuttle's AI announced. Vessel signature matches Vraxian tactical pursuit craft. They found us, Zara whispered, fear constricting her chest. Chen's hands flew over the controls. They must have tracked the payment transfer. Damn it. He glanced at Zara. Strap in. This is going to get rough. The shuttle lurched as Chen pushed its engines beyond recommended limits, diving toward a nearby asteroid field. Behind them, 3 sleek Vraxian vessels cut through space like predatory fish, gaining ground despite the shuttle's evasive maneuvers. Why not just jump to FTL? Zara asked, fighting to keep her voice steady as she secured herself in the co-pilot's seat. Drive's still cooling from our last jump, Chen replied grimly. 4 minutes until ready. We need to buy time. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a chaotic mass of tumbling rocks ranging from car size to small moon dimensions. Chen guided the shuttle into the field, using the natural obstacles as cover. The Vraxian ships followed, their superior maneuverability evident as they weaved between asteroids with practiced precision. They're fighters, built for this, Chen muttered, yanking the shuttle into a sharp turn that made the hull groan in protest. We're a transport with minimal defensive capabilities. A warning light flashed on the console as one of the pursuers locked weapons systems onto their shuttle. Chen swore under his breath, executing a desperate roll that narrowly avoided the first burst of energy fire. The shot struck a nearby asteroid instead, shattering it into fragments that peppered the shut. Li's hull with metallic pings. 2 minutes to FTL capability, the AI announced calmly, its synthetic voice incongruously peaceful amid the chaos. Another shot grazed their starboard thruster, sending the shuttle into a momentary spin before Chen regained control. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in red. Zara's heart hammered in her chest, the familiar sensation of helplessness threatening to overwhelm her. Then something unexpected happened as fear coursed through her body. Zara felt a strange vibration from the neural inhibitor at the base of her skull. The dampening field from Chen's device seemed to interact with the inhibitor in a way neither was designed for. Instead of blocking her abilities entirely or amplifying them painfully, the interaction created a peculiar resonance. A momentary window where her natural Lyran empathic abilities flowed freely, stronger than she'd ever experienced. In that instant, Zara could feel the Vraxian pursuers, their focused determination, their cold calculation, and beneath it all, a driving fear of their own. They weren't just hunters, they were terrified of failing their mission. The consortium had sent its most elite recovery team, with strict orders to retrieve her at any cost. They're not just trying to recapture me, Zara gasped, the realization hitting her with crystal clarity. They're desperate. There's something about me specifically that they can't lose. Chen glanced at her sharply. How do you? I can feel them, she interrupted, wincing as the inhibitor heated against her skin. Something's happening with the inhibitor. The dampening field is causing some kind of feedback loop. Chen's eyes widened in understanding. The resonance effect. Our scientists theorized it might be possible, but a direct hit rocked the shuttle, cutting off his words. The main lights failed, emergency systems bathing them in dim blue illumination. The shuttle tumbled helplessly, structural integrity warnings screaming across every remaining functional display. FTL drive damaged, the AI reported. Rerouting power. Estimate 3 minutes to partial restoration. Chen's face was grim in the emergency lighting. We don't have 3 minutes. Through her newly enhanced empathic sense, Zara could feel the Vraxian commander's satisfaction. They were closing in for capture, preparing to dock and board. In moments, she would be back in consortium hands, destined for the research facility and the fate she'd glimpsed in the hologram of Subject 127. Chen, she said, her voice steadying despite the chaos around them. Your device, the neural dampener. Can it be modified to increase output? He looked at her with sudden intensity. Yes, but it would burn out within minutes. And the feedback to your inhibitor could be dangerous, possibly fatal. Zara's hand moved to the inhibitor embedded in her neck. What if that's exactly what we need right now? Understanding dawned in Chen's eyes. You want to weaponize the resonance effect. They made me into a weapon, Zara said, a new determination hardening her voice. Maybe it's time they understood what that really means. As the Vraxian ships moved into position to capture the crippled shuttle, Chen's hands flew over his wrist device, making rapid adjustments while explaining the risks. What Zara was suggesting had never been attempted, using the inhibitor's own technology against its creators by amplifying rather than suppressing her abilities through the feedback loop. The neural dampener began to glow hot against Chen's wrist as he pushed its output beyond safety limitations. Simultaneously, the inhibitor at the base of Zara's skull heated uncomfortably, the sensation of burning spreading down her spine and radiating through her nervous system. And then the pain began in earnest, a white-hot agony that threatened to consume her consciousness entirely. But with it came power, raw, unfiltered empathic energy unlike anything she'd ever experienced. As the lead Vraxian vessel extended its docking clamps toward the shuttle, Zara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, focusing on everything the consortium had taught her never to attempt. The universe seemed to hold its breath as Zara reached out with her newly amplified abilities. Her consciousness expanded beyond the confines of the shuttle, brushing against the minds of the Vraxian hunters with feather-like precision. She could feel their disciplined focus, their cold determination, and beneath it all, that same driving fear that failure was not an option. But then she sensed something else, something that made her blood run cold. "Chen," she gasped, eyes flying open. "There's someone else out there. Something different." Chen's attention was split between the approaching Vraxian vessels and the shuttle's faltering systems. "Different how?" "Not Vraxian," Zara said, struggling to interpret the unfamiliar presence. "Stronger. Watching. Waiting." As if summoned by her words, a new alert blared from the console. A massive energy signature had appeared at the edge of the asteroid field, seemingly materializing from nowhere. The readings were off the charts, suggesting a vessel far larger than the Vraxian pursuit craft. "Stealth technology," Chen muttered, studying the readouts with growing alarm. "Military grade. That's not consortium." The mysterious vessel remained stationary, observing the confrontation from a distance. Its presence had an immediate effect on the Vraxian pursuers. Their coordinated formation faltered, their emotions shifting from confident determination to uncertainty. "They're afraid," Zara whispered, her enhanced empathy picking up the ripples of panic spreading through the Vraxian crews. "Whoever this is, the consortium fears them." The lead Vraxian ship abruptly broke off its approach to the shuttle, redirecting power to defensive systems. The other two vessels followed suit, forming a protective triangle with weapons trained on the newcomer. Chen's expression shifted from confusion to grim understanding. "The hegemony." The word meant nothing to Zara, but the dread in Chen's voice told her everything she needed to know. "Friends of yours?" "The opposite." His hands moved rapidly over the controls, attempting to coax any remaining power from the shuttle's damaged systems. "The Arcturus hegemony is a reclusive species from the galactic core. Technologically advanced, isolationist, and universally feared. They don't typically venture this far into the outer systems." "Then why are they here now?" Before Chen could answer, a deep thrumming vibration permeated the shuttle, bypassing its hull entirely. It wasn't sound in the conventional sense, more like a direct resonance with the nervous system. Zara felt it especially strongly through her inhibitor, which pulsed in response. "They're scanning us," Chen said, his voice tight. "Or more likely, scanning you." The massive vessel began to move, gliding through the asteroid field with impossible grace for something its size. The Vraxian ships fired warning shots that dissipated harmlessly against the hegemony ship's shields. In response, 3 precise energy pulses erupted from the large. Our vessel, disabling the Vraxian engines without destroying the ships themselves. With the pursuers neutralized, the hegemony vessel turned its attention fully to the crippled shuttle. A new communication channel opened automatically on their console, bypassing the shuttle's security protocols with disturbing ease. No visual appeared, only a voice, smooth and androgynous, speaking perfect galactic common with an oddly musical cadence. "Lieutenant Commander Daniel Chen of Terran Special Operations," the voice said. "And Zara of the Lyran Collective. How fortunate to find you both together." Chen's face drained of color. "How do you know our identities?" "We know many things, Commander, including the true nature of your mission and the unique properties of your Lyran companion." Zara felt a chill run through her body. The voice continued, addressing her directly. "The resonance you experienced between your neural inhibitor and the dampening device was not an accident, young one. It was an outcome we have been monitoring for some time." "What do you want with me?" Zara demanded, finding courage despite her fear. "It is not what we want with you, but what we have already invested in you," the voice replied. "Your capture by the consortium 3 years ago was arranged. Your placement in their empathic development program was arranged. Your genetic testing, your neural modifications, even your rescue by Commander Chen, all arranged." Chen's face hardened with anger and disbelief. "That's impossible. This extraction was classified at the highest levels." "Indeed. By individuals within your government who answer to interests beyond your understanding." The voice maintained its unsettling calm. "The Vraxian Consortium is merely one pawn in a much larger game. As are you, Commander." A new wave of vibration passed through the shuttle, stronger this time. The damaged systems suddenly flickered back to life, displays showing power restoration across all critical functions. "We have temporarily repaired your vessel," the voice informed them. "You may proceed to your original destination. But know this, what has been awakened in Zara cannot be suppressed again. The amplification you witness today is merely the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evolution, young one. Guided evolution." The communication channel closed abruptly. Outside, the hegemony vessel began to move away, its massive form seeming to fold in upon itself until it disappeared entirely, leaving no trace on their sensors. Chen and Zara sat in stunned silence, the implications of what they'd heard hanging heavy between them. The shuttle systems continued their miraculous recovery, the AI calmly announcing that FTL capability had been restored. "I don't understand," Zara finally said. "If what they said is true, if my capture was planned, then nothing about the past 3 years was what I thought." Her voice cracked. "I wasn't a random victim. I was chosen." Chen's expression was unreadable as he initiated the FTL drive sequence. "We need to get to the outpost. Something much bigger is happening here." As the shuttle prepared to jump, Zara's inhibitor began to pulse rhythmically against her skin. Unlike the painful burning sensation from earlier, this felt almost pleasant, a gentle humming that seemed to sync with her heartbeat. With each pulse, her awareness expanded a little further, reaching beyond the shuttle's hull to the stars beyond, and somewhere, deep in her mind, she heard a whisper that wasn't her own. "The hegemony believes they created you for their purposes. The consortium believes they were developing you for theirs. The humans believe they rescued you for their cause. But they all fail to understand the most important truth." "What truth?" Zara whispered aloud, causing Chen to look at her sharply. "That you are not their experiment." The voice continued. "They are yours." As the shuttle jumped to FTL, Zara caught a fleeting glimpse of something impossible, a vast network of glowing threads connecting stars across the galaxy, with particularly bright concentrations around certain worlds, including Earth. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her with a single, chilling realization. The inhibitor in her neck wasn't controlling her abilities. It was controlling something else entirely, something that had been dormant within the Lyran people for millennia, something the hegemony had rediscovered and sought to harness through her, and whatever game was being played, Zara was not merely a pawn. She was the board itself. The journey to the hidden Terran outpost passed in tense silence. Chen spent most of it sending encrypted transmissions to his superiors, his face growing grimmer with each response. Zara kept to herself, trying to make sense of the voice that had spoken in her mind and the strange visions that continued to flicker at the edges of her consciousness. 3 days later, their shuttle docked at what appeared to be an abandoned mining facility carved into a small moon. The external structures were decrepit, but as they passed through a series of security checkpoints, the interior revealed itself to be a state-of-the-art military installation. "Welcome to Blackpoint," Chen said, leading her through corridors staffed by personnel in unmarked uniforms. One of humanity's best-kept secrets. They were immediately ushered into a medical bay where a team of specialists waited. Dr. Maya Patel, the lead physician, explained the procedure they hoped to perform. "We've developed a method to decouple the inhibitor from your nervous system without triggering its fail-safe protocols," she told Zara, displaying holographic models of the device embedded in her neck. "But after what Commander Chen has reported about the hegemony's claims, we need to proceed with extreme caution." Zara studied the doctor's face, sensing genuine concern beneath her professional demeanor. "What aren't you telling me?" Dr. Patel exchanged a glance with Chen before answering. "The inhibitor's integration with your neural pathways is unlike anything we've documented in other Lyran captives. It's not just suppressing your abilities, it's redirecting them, channeling your natural empathic energy through specific circuits within the device itself." "To what end?" Zara asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "We believe it's transmitting data," Chen said quietly. "Not just monitoring your abilities, but collecting and sending information somewhere. The question is where and to whom." The operation was scheduled for the following morning. That night, alone in her assigned quarters, Zara felt the inhibitor pulse with increasing urgency. The voice returned, clearer than before. Asterisk, they cannot remove what has already become part of you. Asterisk, it whispered. Asterisk, the seeds have been planted. They will bloom regardless. Asterisk, who are you? Zara demanded aloud. What do you want from me? Asterisk, I am the collective memory of your people, preserved when they chose to forget. What I want is irrelevant. What matters is what you will choose when you understand the truth. Asterisk, before she could question. On further, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed her quarters as Chen's voice came through the communication system. Security breach in sectors 3 through 7. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Zara rushed to her door, finding it locked from the outside. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel waves of panic and determination emanating from throughout the facility. Something had infiltrated Blackpoint. The door suddenly slid open, revealing Chen in full combat gear. We need to move. Now. What's happening? She asked as he led her through emergency corridors away from the main complex. Multiple breaches. Vraxian strike teams, somehow they found us. His face was tight with controlled fear. But they're not alone. They're others. Something we can't identify on our scanners, moving through the facility as if the walls don't exist. They reached a small hangar containing several escape pods. Chen quickly programmed one, his movements practiced and efficient despite the chaos around them. This will take you to a Terran outpost in the Procyon system, he explained, handing her a small data chip. Give this to Admiral Cassidy. She's one of the few people I still trust. You're not coming with me. I can't. His eyes met hers with grim resolve. Someone compromised our location. I need to find out who, and I can't do that running. An explosion rocked the facility, close enough to shower them with dust from the ceiling. Chen urged her toward the pod, but Zara hesitated. There's something you should know, she said. The voice in my head. It claims to be the collective memory of my people. It says the inhibitor isn't just controlling me, it's awakening something that the Lyrans chose to forget. Chen's expression shifted subtly. Maya scans showed unusual activity in portions of your brain typically dormant in most Lyrans. Areas associated with what ancient texts called the Great Bond, a mythical connection that supposedly once linked all Lyran minds. Not mythical, Zara whispered. And not just Lyran minds. Before Chen could respond, the hangar door burst open. A squad of Vraxian soldiers poured in, weapons raised. Behind them floated 3 tall, slender figures unlike any species Zara had ever seen. Hegemony representatives, their bodies seeming to phase in and out of solid form. Surrender the Lyran, the lead hegemony figure demanded, its voice the same musical cadence Zara had heard over the communication channel. Her transition has already begun. The inhibitor must remain until the process is complete. Chen raised his weapon. That's not happening. The standoff lasted only seconds before the Vraxians opened fire. Chen pushed Zara toward the escape pod as he returned fire, creating a defensive position behind a cargo container. Time seemed to slow as Zara watched the battle unfold. Chen was outnumbered and outgunned. The hegemony representatives remained untouched by the firefight, observing with clinical detachment as their Vraxian pawns did the fighting. In that moment, something shifted within Zara. The inhibitor at the base of her skull grew warm, then hot, but instead of pain, she felt a surge of clarity and purpose. The voice returned, no longer a whisper but a chorus of countless minds speaking as one. Asterisk, the time has come. The choice is yours. Asterisk, Zara stepped away from the escape pod, ignoring Chen's shouts to take cover. She walked deliberately into the open space between the combatants, her hands raised. Enough, she said, her voice carrying with unexpected authority. To everyone's astonishment, the weapons in the Vraxians' hands suddenly grew too hot to hold. They dropped their rifles, crying out in pain and confusion. Even Chen's weapon slipped from his grasp, its power cell inexplicably drained. The lead hegemony figure tilted its head, studying Zara with new interest. The transition progresses faster than anticipated. There is no transition, Zara replied, feeling power flow through her unlike anything she'd experienced before. Only remembering. With deliberate movements, she reached up and placed her fingers on the inhibitor. The device, which had been fused to her nervous system for 3 years, detached easily at her touch, falling into her palm like a discarded piece of jewelry. The hegemony representatives moved back in alarm. Impossible. The integration process cannot be reversed. It was never your integration, Zara said, her voice overlaid with harmonics that seemed to vibrate the very air. The inhibitor didn't change me. I changed it. She closed her fist around the device, which crumbled to dust between her fingers. As it disintegrated, the truth that had been hidden from her, from all Lyrans, for thousands of years became blindingly clear. The Lyrans had once been among the most powerful telepathic species in the galaxy, capable of connecting minds across vast distances, bridging not just thoughts but consciousness itself. This ability had made them not masters, but mediators, the living network that had once united diverse species in peaceful cooperation. But some, like the ancestors of the hegemony, had feared this power. In a coordinated strike millennia ago, they had attacked the Lyran homeworld, unleashing a weapon that had damaged the collective consciousness of the entire species, leaving them with only fragmented empathic abilities and no memory of their true heritage. The inhibitor, ironically designed to control her, had actually been the key to repairing what had been broken. The neural pathways that had once connected her to the vast network of minds throughout the galaxy. The consortium didn't create a weapon, Zara said, turning to Chen with a sad smile. They accidentally created a cure. Every adjustment they made to enhance my abilities was actually restoring connections that had been severed thousands of years ago. The lead hegemony figure moved forward, its form solidifying into something more substantial. You do not understand the consequences of what you are doing. The Lyran network nearly destroyed galactic civilization once before. That's a lie, Zara replied calmly. The network preserved peace until your ancestors destroyed it out of fear. And now you hope to control it for yourselves, using me as your conduit. She turned to Chen, who watched with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The hegemony didn't arrange my capture to help me evolve. They did it because they discovered ancient records about what my people once were, and they wanted that power for themselves. If what you're saying is true, Chen said slowly, then what happens now? Zara closed her eyes, reaching out with her newly awakened senses. She could feel the minds of everyone in the facility, the Terran soldiers fighting desperately in other sections, the Vraxian forces pressing their advantage, the handful of hegemony observers directing the assault from the shadows, and beyond them, like distant stars coming into focus, she sensed other Lyrans scattered throughout the galaxy, each one carrying the dormant potential to reconnect with the network that had once bound them tog. Ether. Now, she said, opening her eyes, I remember not just for myself, but for all of us. Energy cascaded from her in gentle, expanding waves. The Vraxian soldiers surrounding them slowly lowered their weapons, confusion giving way to a dawning awareness as the psychic energy touched their minds. The hegemony representatives tried to retreat, their forms shifting rapidly between solid and incorporeal states, but they couldn't escape the expanding field of influence. What are you doing to them? Chen asked, watching the transformation in disbelief. Showing them the truth. All of them. Zara's voice was strained with effort. Not controlling their minds, but opening them to possibilities beyond the conflicts they've been manipulated into fighting. The lead hegemony figure collapsed to its knees, its form fully solid now and vulnerable. You cannot undo centuries of galactic order with mere thoughts, it protested, though its voice lacked conviction. I'm not imposing anything, Zara replied. I'm simply removing the barriers that have kept us divided. What happens next depends on all of us. The psychic wave continued to expand, reaching beyond the facility, beyond the moon, into space itself. Throughout the galaxy, other Lyrans, whether free or enslaved, suddenly paused in whatever they were doing, their eyes widening as ancient connections re-established themselves, memories not their own flooding their consciousness. I in the hangar, Vraxians and humans alike stood in stunned silence, weapons forgotten as they experienced something unprecedented, a moment of complete understanding of each other's perspectives, fears, and hopes. Even the hegemony representatives, for all their advanced evolution, found themselves unable to resist the wave of empathic connection. Chen alone seemed partially shielded, perhaps due to his prolonged exposure to the dampening field he had used to protect Zara. He approached her cautiously. "Is this what freedom looks like for you?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Becoming a psychic beacon for an entire species?" Zara turned to him, tears streaming down her face despite her smile. "Not a beacon. A reminder." She reached out, touching his temple lightly with her fingertips. In that instant, Chen saw what she now understood, that the universe was far more interconnected than any species had realized, that the artificial divisions between civilizations were just that, artificial. The Lyrans hadn't been meant to rule or control, they had been the living bridges between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. "Your people will still need advocates among the humans," she said softly. "The network is awakening, but it needs protection while it grows. Will you help?" Before Chen could answer, a tremor ran through Zara's body. Her eyes widened in surprise and pain. "What's wrong?" he asked, catching her as she stumbled. "The network," she gasped. "Something's interfering. Something old and," her words cut off as her body convulsed. Around them, the Vraxians and even the hegemony representatives were similarly affected, clutching their heads in sudden agony that a new presence made itself known, vast, ancient, and utterly alien even to Zara's expanded awareness. It pressed against the reawakening network like a great weight, threatening to crush it before it could fully reestablish itself. "What is that?" Chen demanded, supporting Zara as the tremors racked her body. Through gritted teeth, she managed to answer. "The reason the network was shut down, in the first place. Not the hegemony, something else, something that feeds on connected minds." The lead hegemony figure, still on its knees, looked up with newfound understanding and fear. "The void convergence. We thought it was just a myth, a story to frighten children." "It's real," Zara whispered, "and it's been waiting for the network to reactivate." As darkness threatened to overwhelm her consciousness, Zara made one final, desperate effort. Instead of fighting the presence, she opened herself to it completely, allowing it to focus its attention entirely on her rather than the fragile, newly reawakened connections. "What are you doing?" Chen cried, feeling her grow heavier in his arms as her consciousness withdrew. With the last of her strength, Zara pressed something into Chen's hand, a small crystal that had somehow formed from the dust of her destroyed inhibitor. It glowed with an inner light, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "Not an ending," she whispered, her voice fading. "A beginning." As consciousness slipped away, Zara's last sensation was of falling into an infinite darkness, not alone, but drawing the ancient predator with her, away from the vulnerable network of minds that had just begun to remember their connection. Her body remained, breathing but unresponsive, as the psychic shockwave she had created continued to ripple outward through the galaxy, awakening Lyrans everywhere to their forgotten heritage. Chen looked down at the crystal in his palm, which continued to pulse with gentle light. Within its depths, he could almost see Zara, not as she had been, but as she now existed, suspended between physical reality and something far beyond ordinary comprehension. Fighting a battle that had begun millennia ago, to protect a connection that transcended species, planets, and perhaps even time itself. The war for the soul of the galaxy had only just begun. And somehow, a human soldier had found himself holding its most precious weapon, not the Lyran girl who had been enslaved, but the unknown future she had sacrificed herself to protect. That I, in his other hand, Chen's communication device chirped with an incoming message from his superiors, demanding a status report. Looking around at the transformed beings in the hangar, former enemies now linked by an understanding that transcended words, he made his decision. Some stories were too important to become classified military reports. Some truths needed to be shared with all of humanity, regardless of the consequences. "This is Lieutenant Commander Daniel Chen," he said, opening a channel not to his superiors but to all Terran frequencies. And I have a story you need to hear about a young alien girl who was enslaved until she changed everything. The aftermath of Chen's transmission rippled across human space with the force of a supernova. Within days, the recording had spread to every colony, outpost, and Earth neighborhood. Governments tried to dismiss it as fiction, conspiracy theory, or the delusions of a traumatized soldier. But too many witnesses had experienced the psychic wave Zara had released, and too many Lyrans were beginning to remember. 3 months later, Chen stood at the observation window of a specially constructed medical facility on Luna Base, watching doctors tend to Zara's physical form. Her body remained alive, breathing, heart beating, but brain scans showed activity patterns never before documented in any species. The crystal she had given him sat in a specialized containment field nearby, still pulsing with that same steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat. "Any change?" Dr. Patel asked, entering the room with a data tablet. Chin shook his head. "Nothing visible. But I can feel her sometimes. Not her thoughts exactly, more like her presence." Dr. Patel nodded without surprise. Brain scans had shown subtle changes in Chen's neural patterns as well, not as dramatic as those in the Lyrans who had been fully awakened to the network, but significant nonetheless. His prolonged exposure to Zara and the dampening field had created unique pathways in his mind, making him one of the few humans capable of sensing echoes from the psychic network. "The consortium representative is ready to see you," Dr. Patel said. "He seems nervous." "He should be," Chen replied, giving Zara's still form one last glance before leaving the observation room. In the months since the Blackpoint incident, the balance of power throughout the galaxy had shifted dramatically. The Vraxian Consortium, its leadership shaken by the psychic revelation, had fractured into competing factions. Many Vraxians who had been present during Zara's awakening had laid down their weapons permanently, dedicating themselves instead to what they called the Reconciliation, a movement spreading rapidly among species once engaged in bitter rivalries. The hegemony had withdrawn entirely from known space, their ships vanishing beyond the galactic core. Rumors suggested civil war among their kind, between those who had experienced Zara's revelations and those who feared the reawakening of the Lyran network. Chen found Director Krell, once a high-ranking consortium official, waiting in a conference room under the watchful eyes of Terran security. The Vraxian looked diminished somehow, his normally imposing frame hunched with what might have been guilt or simply exhaustion. "Commander Chen," Krell greeted him formally. "I've brought what you requested." He placed a data crystal on the table between them. The complete records of every Lyran in consortium custody. Locations, conditions, genetic profiles, everything. And the research data on the neural inhibitors. Chen pressed. "Included. Though I suspect it will be of limited value now." Krell's multifaceted eyes fixed on Chen with uncomfortable intensity. "The awakening continues, with or without the technology. We merely accelerated what was perhaps inevitable." Chen pocketed the crystal. "You enslaved sentient beings, Director. Don't try to reframe it as some kind of beneficial scientific program." "I do not seek absolution," Krell replied with surprising dignity. "Merely understanding. What I experienced in that hangar, it changed me in ways I cannot fully articulate." "Join the club," Chen muttered. After Krell was escorted out, Chen returned to Zara's room. The medical staff had finished their daily examinations and left her alone. He pulled up a chair beside her bed, as he had done nearly every day since they'd established the facility. "Got the data," he told her still form. "Rescue operations are already underway for the other Lyrans. Your people are finding each other, remembering who they were. Who they are." He took the crystal from his pocket, not the data crystal from Krell, but the one Zara had created. In the privacy of the room, he allowed himself to hold it, feeling its warmth pulsing against his palm. "They keep wanting to study this," he said, watching the light shimmer within its facets. "I tell them it's just a piece of the inhibitor that crystallized somehow. They don't need to know more than that." Through the crystal, he sensed rather than heard Zara's response: amusement, gratitude, and something deeper that defied translation into words. Wherever she was, fighting her battle against the ancient consciousness that had threatened the network, she was still aware of this world, this moment. The first Lyran representatives arrived at the United Earth Council yesterday. He continued. They're proposing a formal alliance. Not just diplomatic, something deeper. They're calling it the Remembered Bond. Some people are afraid, but most are curious. Hopeful even. He closed his eyes, focusing on the crystal's warmth. Through it, he caught fragmented impressions. Vast darkness, points of light like distant mines, and Zara, not as she had been, but as something greater. Her consciousness expanded beyond individual identity, yet still recognizably herself. Asterisk, the void retreats, but never surrenders. Asterisk, came the whispered thought, more impression than words. Asterisk, I am learning its patterns. Its weaknesses. Asterisk, is there anything we can do? Chen asked aloud, knowing she would understand. Asterisk, keep the connections growing. Every awakened mind strengthens the network. The void feeds on division and isolation. Asterisk, Chen nodded, though he wasn't sure if she could see him. We're trying. It's not always easy, getting different species to trust each other. Even with everything that's happened. A sense of gentle amusement flowed through the connection. Asterisk, humans are particularly stubborn, but also particularly adaptable. That's why I chose you, Daniel. Asterisk, the use of his first name startled him. In all their time together before her transformation, she had only ever called him Chin or Commander. Asterisk, I am not lost. Asterisk, the impression continued. Asterisk, I am becoming. And one day, when the void is contained, I will return, not as I was, but as I need to be. Asterisk, the crystal's light pulsed brighter for a moment, and Chen felt a wave of emotion that transcended ordinary experience. Not just hope or determination, but a complex harmony of purpose that resonated with something deep within his own consciousness. When the connection faded, he carefully tucked the crystal away in the special container he kept with him at all times. Standing, he looked down at Zara's peaceful face one last time before leaving. Outside the facility, Earth hung in the blackness of space, a blue jewel against the vastness of the cosmos. Somewhere out there, other Lyrans were awakening to their heritage. Other species were learning to communicate in ways that transcended language. And humans, with their unique blend of skepticism and wonder, were taking their first steps into a universe far more connected than they had ever imagined. The young alien girl who had been enslaved hadn't just been rescued, she had become the rescuer, awakening a galaxy to possibilities long forgotten. And though the journey ahead remained uncertain, with ancient dangers lurking in the darkness between stars, Chin knew with unshakable conviction that Zara's sacrifice had not been an end, but a beginning. A new chapter in the story of all conscious beings who looked up at the night sky and wondered, are we truly alone? The answer, as Zara had shown them, was both simpler and more profound than anyone had dared to imagine. We never were.